No one thought the mighty would fall. But Jackson Cole, once hailed as one of the youngest self-made millionaires in Silicon Valley, had hit rock bottom, hard. Just 3 years earlier, he'd been gracing the covers of business magazines, delivering TED Talks and partying with Hollywood's elite. Now, he was sitting alone on a park bench in Central Park, eating a cold slice of pizza and trying to figure out what the hell had gone wrong. The crash wasn't sudden. It came like a slow leak. A bad investment here, a lawsuit there, a partner who wasn't what he seemed. By the time Jackson realized how deep in the hole he was, it was too late. His assets were frozen, his accounts drained, and the downtown penthouse he called home had been reclaimed by the bank. Now 38, broke, and living in a 2-bedroom rental in Queens, Jackson didn't even have a car anymore. His driver had long since quit, and he used the subway like everyone else. He wore off-the-rack suits from outlet stores and ate ramen noodles more than he cared to admit. But none of that hurt like the laughter. The same people who had once praised him, invited him to their summer homes in the Hamptons, who toasted his brilliant instincts, they were the ones now whispering behind his back, mocking his downfall. The media was worse. One clickbait headline read, "From billion-dollar brain to broke and bitter, what happened to Jackson Cole?" At first, Jackson wanted to fight it, to prove everyone wrong. But the more he tried, the more he realized how empty it all was. Money had bought him status, attention and convenience, but not purpose, until he met her. A chance encounter. It was a grey Thursday afternoon in November, cold enough to see your breath, when Jackson saw her. She was huddled under a bus shelter on 4th Street, holding a beat-up book in one hand and a tattered backpack in the other. She looked about 10 or 11, too small for her oversized hoodie, and had dirt smudged on her cheeks. Something about her stopped him in his tracks. She wasn't panhandling. She wasn't asking for anything. She was just there, quiet, focused, reading. Jackson, curious, stepped closer, the book in her hand. Quantum Physics for Beginners. He blinked. "Hey," he said cautiously, "where'd you get that book?" The girl looked up, her eyes bright blue and sharp. "Library, the one on 32nd. They tossed the damaged books." "You like that stuff?" She shrugged. "It makes sense." Jackson chuckled, more out of disbelief than humor. "That makes one of us." The girl closed the book and stared at him. "You got money for food?" "Barely," he admitted. "You're dressed like you used to," she said, glancing at his coat. "Not like someone who's broke." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "What makes you think I'm broke?" She smirked. "Because you're eating a $1 slice and your shoes are 2 seasons old." He laughed, genuinely this time. "You always this observant?" "Always." The decision. They parted ways that day, but Jackson couldn't shake her from his mind. Over the next week, he saw her in the same spot, every afternoon after school hours, reading something different every time. Books on neuroscience, architecture, ancient history. Finally, he asked, "Where are your parents?" "Don't have 'em," she said simply. "I was in foster care. Didn't stick." "You live out here?" "Mostly." Jackson hesitated, then said, "I don't have much, but I have a place to stay, and heat, and food." She looked at him like he was crazy. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe I am." That night, he brought her home. He called child services the next morning and began the long, bureaucratic journey toward legal guardianship. Everyone around him thought he'd lost his mind. "You can't afford this," his brother said. "You're not stable enough for that kind of responsibility," an old business associate warned. Even the social worker looked skeptical. "Are you sure you want to do this, Mr. Cole? You're not exactly in a good place yourself." "I don't know if I'm ready," Jackson said, "but I know she deserves better than a park bench." Backlash and mockery. Word got out fast. The media pounced. Bankrupt tech bro tries to save reputation by adopting homeless kid. Desperate move or PR stunt. He couldn't manage a company, now he thinks he can raise a child? Jackson didn't care, not anymore. He'd spent years chasing approval, and it left him with nothing. But something about this girl who, he now knew, was named Ellie, felt like a second chance. The first few weeks were rough. Ellie was guarded, sarcastic, and used to being alone. She didn't trust adults. She barely trusted Jackson. She never smiled. She didn't ask for anything. But every night she read. She devoured books faster than he could find them, And slowly, she started to open up about the group homes, the cold nights, the fights, and the dreams she thought she'd never chase. "I want to be a scientist," she said one night, "the kind that changes the world." Jackson looked at her, really looked, and said, "Then that's what you're going to be." Jackson Cole didn't know how to be a parent. Hell, he wasn't even sure he knew how to be a responsible adult anymore. He'd built companies, spoken at tech summits, and dined with billionaires, but now every morning he woke up to the sound of Ellie shuffling around in the kitchen, pouring dry cereal into a bowl and humming softly under her breath, and he felt more out of his depth than ever. The two-bedroom apartment in Queens had once felt empty, depressing. Now it was filled with books, notebooks, and the constant tapping of fingers on a tablet or pencil on paper. Ellie was always studying, reading advanced scientific journals, watching college lectures on YouTube, or quizzing Jackson on things he hadn't even heard of. She didn't just learn, she absorbed. Her brain was like a vacuum, sucking up knowledge faster than he could keep up with. But school was already becoming a problem. One Tuesday afternoon, Jackson got a call from Ellie's principal. He took the subway across town and found himself in a sterile office with fluorescent lights and the smell of old coffee in the air. Principal Ramirez, a tired woman in her 50s with kind eyes, sighed as she leaned across her desk. "Mr. Cole," she began, "Ellie's test scores are off the charts, literally. She's answering questions that aren't even in the curriculum." "That sounds like a good thing," Jackson said, confused. "It would be if she weren't challenging the teachers in the middle of class, correcting them on equations, disrupting lessons. She's not being malicious, but she's overwhelming." Jackson rubbed the back of his neck. "She's not trying to be difficult. She's just bored." Ramirez nodded. "I believe that. But she needs more than what we can offer here." Jackson left the school feeling conflicted. He didn't have the money for some fancy private school, and he wasn't about to throw her back into a system that didn't know what to do with her. So he started researching gifted programs and scholarships that night, long after Ellie had fallen asleep on the couch with a book on neurolinguistics open on her chest. One of his emails reached a man named Dr. Lucas Merrick, a former MIT researcher who now ran a non-profit for academically gifted but underprivileged children. The next week, Dr. Merrick invited them to an evaluation session at his lab on the Upper West Side. Ellie was quiet during the ride over, staring out the window as they passed brownstones and bodegas. Jackson could tell she was nervous, even if she wouldn't admit it. When they arrived, the lab looked more like a startup office, glass walls, beanbags, and whiteboards filled with scribbles. Merrick, a lanky man with a silver ponytail and bright green glasses, greeted them with a warm smile. "So this is the girl who stumped her algebra teacher by explaining Fourier transforms." Ellie didn't smile. "He got the signs wrong on a negative coefficient." Merrick laughed. "Even so, that's impressive." What followed was 3 hours of puzzles, logic tests, math problems, language processing tasks, and a battery of challenges Jackson couldn't even begin to understand. He sat outside in the waiting room, clutching a coffee and scrolling through freelance job alerts on his phone, all while worrying Ellie was being judged too harshly. When she emerged, her expression was unreadable. Merrick followed with a clipboard, shaking his head in awe. "She's one of the most intuitively brilliant minds I've seen in 20 years. That night, Jackson grilled grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner, and Ellie finally cracked a small smile. "This mean I don't have to go back to that boring school?" she asked. Jackson grinned. "Let's just say, we've got options now." Over the next few months, Ellie began attending weekend sessions at Dr. Merrick's institute. She met other kids like her, brilliant, weird, intense, passionate, and for once she didn't feel like the odd one out. She even made a friend, a boy named Zane, who spoke 3 languages and wanted to become an astrophysicist. They'd trade ideas and challenge each other's theories like 2 grad students. It was strange to see 2 12-year-olds arguing about entropy over peanut butter sandwiches. Meanwhile, Jackson juggled gigs as a tech consultant and part-time developer. He was doing better, not great, but stable. He even started going to therapy, something he'd always brushed off before. His therapist, a woman named Andrea, was blunt and kind and didn't let him dodge questions. "You adopted a kid when your life was still in pieces," she said during one session. "Why?" He stared at the floor. "Because when I saw her, I saw someone who deserved more than what life had handed her. And maybe I saw a little of myself, too." Andrea nodded. "That's noble, but make sure you're not trying to fix yourself through her. Let her be her own person." That stuck with him. He stopped hovering so much. He let Ellie fail sometimes, mess up, get frustrated. He didn't try to fix everything, just be there when she needed him. But not everyone was rooting for them. An article popped up on a clickbait site one day, titled "Bankrupt Tech Guru Adopts Homeless Prodigy, Inspiring or Strategic PR Move?" The photo was grainy, taken from a distance, showing Jackson and Ellie walking out of a grocery store. Ellie saw it before he did. "Are they saying this is fake?" she asked. Jackson's jaw clenched. Ignore it. People always need a story to spin. Still, the article spread. Some commenters were supportive, others weren't. People said he was exploiting her genius, using her to climb back into the spotlight. It hurt, but Ellie handled it better than he did. "Let them talk," she said. "They don't know us." One day, at a parent-student open house at the Institute, Jackson ran into an old acquaintance, Aaron Lutz, an investor who had once tried to poach Jackson's company before the crash. Lutz raised an eyebrow. "Didn't expect to see you here. You back in the game?" "Just here for my daughter," Jackson said evenly. "Daughter? Didn't know you had kids." Jackson smiled without showing teeth. Life changes. Later that night, Ellie asked, "Who was that guy?" "Someone I used to know when I had more money and worse friends." She looked up at him. "You have better friends now." He laughed. "Yeah, I do." Around this time, a new figure entered their lives, Ms. Harper, Ellie's new counselor at the Institute. A tall woman with a voice like a calm radio host, she specialized in working with highly gifted kids who struggled emotionally. She helped Ellie open up about her fears, of abandonment, of being too different, of not knowing what normal even meant. "She's carrying a lot," Harper told Jackson after one session, "but she's also incredibly resilient. She's not just smart, she's strong." Harper became a trusted adult for Ellie, someone she could talk to when she didn't want to burden Jackson. And Jackson was grateful. He wanted Ellie to have a team, people in her corner, because he knew he couldn't do it all alone. Their apartment grew even more alive. Ellie started building small robotics kits. She entered a regional science fair and won first place with a project on neural networks. She gave her acceptance speech in front of 100 strangers, voice clear and confident. "I used to think I was invisible," she said on stage, "but someone saw me, and that changed everything." Jackson watched from the back, eyes misty. Andrea would probably say it wasn't healthy to tie his redemption to Ellie's success, but he didn't care. She was thriving. That was all that mattered. One rainy afternoon, months after that first meeting on 4th Street, Ellie found an old article about Jackson's fall from grace. "You were famous," she said, reading aloud. "Tech prodigy builds empire, then loses it all in under 5 years. That's dramatic," Jackson chuckled. "Yeah, the media loves a rise and fall story." She looked at him seriously. "You're still building. Just something different now." He looked at her, and for the first time in a long while felt truly proud of the man he was becoming. That night, as they sat watching a documentary on black holes, Ellie suddenly asked, "Do you think people can be second chances?" Jackson turned toward her. "What do you mean?" "Like, not just get them, but be them, for someone else." He smiled. "Yeah, I do. I think that's exactly what you are for me." She didn't say anything right away, but he saw her cheeks flush slightly, and she leaned against his shoulder, silent and content. In a world that had written both of them off, they had found something rare and real, a bond not built on blood or fame or success, but on kindness, grit, and the belief that broken things could be made whole again. And that, Jackson realized, was the greatest comeback of all. Jackson Cole couldn't believe how much had changed in less than a year. The man who once obsessed over quarterly profits and startup valuations now spent his evenings checking math homework and Googling how to fix leaky faucets. Life with Ellie had redefined his priorities in ways he hadn't seen coming. But just as they were starting to find stability, life, true to form, threw them a new curveball. It started innocently enough. One cold January morning, Jackson was sipping lukewarm coffee and scrolling through freelance job listings when Ellie burst through the apartment door, cheeks flushed red from the winter wind. She'd been at the Institute for the morning workshop with Dr. Merrick. "Guess what?" she said, pulling off her coat. "Let me guess. Someone finally beat you in a logic puzzle." "Nope," she grinned. "Dr. Merrick wants me to apply to a pilot program. It's part of a partnership with Stanford. If I get in, I'd be studying with professors from their AI lab." Jackson raised his eyebrows. "Wait, like actually taking college-level courses?" "They're calling it the Accelerated Mind Initiative. It's experimental. They only take 5 students from across the country. Merrick says I have a real shot." He was stunned, proud, terrified. "What's the catch?" he asked. She paused. "I'd have to spend part of the summer in California, on campus, without you." Jackson nodded slowly, masking his nerves. "And how do you feel about that?" "I want to go," she said, "but I'm scared too." He reached out and squeezed her shoulder. "You being scared tells me it matters to you. Let's go for it." The next few weeks became a whirlwind of applications, interviews, and late-night essay rewrites. Jackson watched as Ellie agonized over personal statements, trying to balance humility with honesty about her brilliance. He helped where he could, but mostly he stood back and let her shine. In the middle of all this, another unexpected challenge landed on their doorstep. Ellie's biological mother. Jackson got the call from a woman named Hannah Leeds, a social worker from the city's Child Services Department. She explained that Ellie's file had been flagged after a routine database update. Her mother, whom Ellie hadn't seen since she was 5, was in a rehabilitation program and had recently begun petitioning for contact. "She's not seeking custody," Hannah clarified. "Just visitation rights, supervised meetings. She's in recovery and making progress." Jackson's first instinct was anger. Where was this woman when Ellie was sleeping behind dumpsters and sneaking into train stations for shelter? But he also knew enough to understand that addiction and mental illness didn't move on a clean schedule. He didn't bring it up to Ellie right away. Instead, he spoke with Andrea, his therapist, who reminded him, "This isn't about what's comfortable for you. It's about what's healthy for Ellie." So one quiet Sunday afternoon, he sat Ellie down on the worn corduroy couch and gently said, "There's something you should know." As he explained, her face stayed neutral, too neutral. "She wants to see me?" Ellie asked. Her voice was soft, but her eyes were sharp. "Yes, just supervised visits for now, only if you're okay with it." She didn't answer right away. She stared at the floor, her foot bouncing slightly. "Then, let me think about it." She didn't bring it up again for 2 weeks. When she finally did, it was with a simple, quiet, "Okay, I want to meet her." The meeting took place at a supervised visitation center in Midtown. The room was sterile, but decorated with cheap posters of zoo animals and worn-out beanbags. Jackson sat outside in the lobby, anxiously pacing while Ellie went inside. The visit lasted 30 minutes. When Ellie came out, she looked pale and quiet, but not upset. "Are you okay?" Jackson asked. She nodded. "It was weird. She cried a lot. I didn't know what to say." "That's okay," he said. "You don't have to say anything you don't want to." Later that night, as they watched a rerun of Jeopardy, Ellie said, "She asked me if I hate her." Jackson didn't know how to respond. "What did you say?" he asked carefully. "I told her I didn't know yet." Weeks passed and Ellie visited her mother twice more. The experiences were confusing and emotionally charged. Sometimes she came home angry, other times silent. Jackson gave her space, never pushing, always available. Meanwhile, Stanford sent an email. Ellie had been accepted into the pilot program. They celebrated with pizza and sparkling grape juice. Ellie even let Jackson take a photo of her holding the acceptance letter, though she made him promise never to post it online. As the summer approached, the reality of her leaving began to hit Jackson in the gut. He'd grown used to having her around. The way she muttered equations to herself in the hallway, the way she left half-drunk mugs of tea all over the apartment, her sardonic jokes about physics. He didn't want to smother her, but he didn't know who he'd be without her around. Then came the Stanford orientation trip. They flew out together to Palo Alto for a long weekend. Jackson rented a cheap Airbnb, and they spent their days touring labs, meeting professors, and trying not to be overwhelmed. Ellie blended right in with the other kids. Gifted, strange, brilliant teenagers who argued about ethical AI and watched anime marathons. Jackson stood in the back at most events, proud and invisible. On the final night, as they sat on a bench overlooking the campus quad, Ellie said, "I think I'm ready." "For Stanford?" he asked. "For everything. Being here. Being me." He smiled. "You're not scared?" She nodded. "Still scared, but I think being scared means you're about to do something important." The morning she left for the 6-week summer session, Jackson hugged her tighter than he meant to. "You're going to be amazing," he whispered. "Don't cry, old man," she said with a teasing grin, though her eyes were wet too. Back in New York, the apartment felt cavernous. Jackson kept himself busy, working longer hours, volunteering at a local youth center, even going on a few awkward dates. But nothing filled the gap Ellie left. They FaceTimed every night. She told him about experiments, about kids from Ukraine and Brazil and Thailand, about late-night debates and cafeteria drama. He told her about fixing the leaky faucet and how the neighbor's cat somehow got into their apartment again. Halfway through the summer, Jackson got a letter in the mail. A law firm. At first he assumed it was spam or some creditor from his past life, but as he read, his hands started to shake. Ellie's mother was petitioning for joint custody. She had completed her rehabilitation, had a job, an apartment, and was claiming parental rights under state law. The letter was a formal notice of legal proceedings. Jackson felt like the air had been sucked from his lungs. That night during their video call, he didn't tell Ellie. He couldn't. Not yet. She was so happy, so confident. He didn't want to shake that. Instead, he called Andrea. She picked up immediately. "She's doing this because she sees how well Ellie's doing," Jackson said. "She wants a piece of it." "Maybe," Andrea replied. "Or maybe she genuinely wants to reconnect. Either way, you can't control her motives. You can only advocate for Ellie's best interests." Jackson met with a lawyer the next day. It would be a tough fight. His guardianship wasn't formalized through adoption. It had all happened in a grey legal area. He had no blood tie to Ellie, just love, time, and a record of being there when no one else was. As the legal battle loomed, Jackson finally told Ellie. She didn't say much. She just stared at the floor and then asked, "Can I decide?" "I hope so," Jackson said softly, "but sometimes the system doesn't work that way." She didn't cry, not in front of him, but she didn't sleep that night. The next week, Dr. Merrick arranged for a child advocate to speak with Ellie via video call from California. The woman, a no-nonsense Latina named Teresa Vargas, asked tough questions. "What do you want, Ellie?" "I want to stay with Jackson." "Why?" "Because he's my real family." "And your biological mom?" "I'm glad she's getting better. I hope she stays better, but she wasn't there when I needed her." The court hearing was scheduled for early fall, a week after Ellie's return from Stanford. Jackson dreaded every second of it. But Ellie showed up in court wearing a blazer she'd borrowed from Andrea and holding a folder of statements she'd written herself. When the judge gave her a chance to speak, she stood tall and steady. "I'm not a prize," she said. "I'm not something to be fought over. But if I get a say, I want to live with Jackson. He didn't just give me a place to sleep. He gave me a future." Silence hung over the courtroom like fog. The judge thanked her and called for a recess. 2 days later, the ruling came in. Jackson retained legal guardianship, with Ellie's mother granted monthly supervised visitation and the option to apply for more involvement in the future, only with Ellie's consent. Jackson cried harder that day than he had in years. Ellie didn't say much. She just hugged him and whispered, "Told you. Second chances." It was a Tuesday morning in early November, and Jackson Cole was staring at his coffee machine, wondering if it was finally time to replace the ancient thing, when Ellie came into the kitchen, earbuds in, mumbling something about probability theory. She was 17 now, taller, sharper, more confident than the day he found her alone on a park bench 5 years ago. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and she had her tablet under one arm, a half-finished protein bar in the other. "You sleep?" he asked, glancing up. "A bit. Had a dream where Bertrand Russell was trying to explain Bayesian logic to me in a Chuck E. Cheese," she replied without missing a beat. Jackson blinked. "That's definitely not something I'd have followed. You okay?" "I'm fine," she said. "Just preoccupied. My Stanford advisor wants me to apply early decision. But MIT just invited me to their AI symposium and now I don't know what to do. Jackson sat down and motioned for her to join him. That's a pretty great problem to have, kid. She rolled her eyes. Yeah, I guess. I mean, who knew a homeless girl could get stressed about which Ivy League adjacent school wants her more? He chuckled. You're not just any girl. You're you, and you earned every bit of this. That weekend, they flew to Boston for the MIT symposium. It was Ellie's first time presenting her research, an experimental algorithm she'd designed for teaching neural networks how to adapt adaptional tone in conversational models. Jackson understood about 30% of it, but he didn't need to understand it all. He was just there to support her. The lecture hall was packed with professors, graduate students, and tech CEOs. Jackson sat in the back, wearing the only blazer he still owned from his corporate days, heart pounding with pride as Ellie took the stage. She spoke without notes, her voice calm but passionate. She explained how her early experiences, growing up in unstable environments, constantly adapting, reading people to survive, had inspired her work. We teach machines to think, she said, but rarely to understand. That's what I want to change. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Several professors immediately approached her, asking questions, inviting her to labs, hinting at scholarships. Jackson stood in the background, watching her navigate it all with grace. She was no longer just his kid. She was her own person, fierce, focused, and free. Later that night, as they walked back to the hotel through cold Boston streets, Ellie was quiet. Penny for your thoughts? Jackson asked. She looked at him. I think I know what I want. Yeah? MIT, not because it's better or more famous or whatever, but because it scares me a little more. He smiled. That's always been your compass. Back in New York, life moved fast. Jackson's tech work had taken off again in a strange, satisfying way. Thanks to a few well-placed articles about his journey, some honest storytelling about falling, failing, and fatherhood, he'd started consulting for non-profits and ethical AI startups. He didn't want to build empires anymore. He just wanted to help others build better things. He and Ellie moved into a slightly bigger apartment in Brooklyn, not flashy, but sunny, warm, and full of books and half-built robots. Ellie continued visiting her biological mom once a month. The relationship had stabilized into something cautious but respectful. Her mom was clean, working part-time at a bakery, slowly rebuilding her life. There were no big emotional scenes, just small steps, small talks, and mutual understanding that some things couldn't be undone, only accepted. I don't think she'll ever be what I needed back then, Ellie told Jackson one night. But I think she's trying, and that's worth something. Meanwhile, Ellie's genius didn't go unnoticed. She was invited to appear on a late-night talk show, part of a segment on young innovators. She wore a sleek navy blazer, and when the host asked her who had influenced her most, she smiled and said, "My dad. He showed me that being smart means nothing if you're not also kind." Jackson cried. Again, he was getting good at that. When college acceptance letters finally arrived, Ellie got into both Stanford and MIT. No surprise. She chose MIT, as she'd said she would, and began preparing for her first semester like she was gearing up for space travel. They spent the summer visiting museums, walking the High Line, watching documentaries, and arguing over who made the better superhero, Batman or Iron Man. Ellie insisted Batman was a glorified gym bro with emotional trauma. Jackson countered that Iron Man was basically a walking ego trip with money. "It's funny," she said one night, curled on the couch, "how much life can change." He glanced at her. "Yeah, it is. You ever wonder what would have happened if we never met? If you hadn't been walking past that bench that night?" "All the time," he admitted, "but I don't like thinking about it." "Me neither." She was quiet for a long time. "You saved me," she said finally. "You saved me right back." Moving day came in late August. They packed her things into 2 suitcases and 1 oversized duffel bag full of tech gear. Jackson helped her set up in the dorms, nervously eyeing her roommate and checking the door locks like a helicopter parent. "You know I'll be fine, right?" she said, rolling her eyes. "I know. Doesn't mean I won't worry." He didn't cry until he got back to the car. Over the next year, they talked almost daily. Ellie crushed her classes, made new friends, joined a research team, and became a teaching assistant in her 2nd semester. She was thriving. Jackson, meanwhile, wrote a book, half memoir, half guide for foster and adoptive parents of gifted children. It became an unexpected bestseller in parenting circles. One evening, during a video call, Ellie said, "Remember how everyone laughed when you adopted me?" Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I remember. I still have the article screenshots." "Well, they're not laughing now." He grinned. "Nope, now they're probably trying to get you to intern for them." A year later, Ellie was invited to speak at TEDx. Her topic? The science of second chances. She told her story. The park bench, the man who didn't walk past, the long nights, the therapy, the fear of being too much, and the realization that intelligence wasn't about test scores, but empathy. "My dad once said I was his second chance," she said, her voice steady, "but I think we were each other's. Sometimes you don't need perfect circumstances, you just need one person who believes in you when no one else does." Jackson sat in the audience, surrounded by strangers who were now her fans, and clapped until his hands hurt. Afterward, a woman approached him, an older lady with greying hair and tired eyes. "Are you her father?" "Yes," he said, without hesitation. "I just wanted to say thank you. My granddaughter was in foster care. She's doing better now. And your daughter's story? It gives people like us hope." He nodded, overwhelmed. "She gives me hope." As the night wound down, Ellie came up to him, still wearing her mic headset, buzzing from the performance. "You did it," he said. "We did," she corrected. Years later, after Ellie had earned her dual PhD in computer science and cognitive neuroscience, she co-founded a tech non-profit focused on AI education for underserved youth. She called it Benchstart, named after that moment when it all began. Jackson served on the board, not because he wanted credit, but because he still liked being nearby. At the grand opening of their first learning center, Jackson gave a short speech. He didn't use a script. "I used to think I had it all, money, power, influence, and then I lost it, and I thought I had nothing left to offer the world. But then I met a little girl who'd been dealt the worst hand imaginable, and she reminded me that sometimes when you lose everything, you find what really matters." He looked out at the crowd, young people, parents, educators, dreamers, and smiled. "We weren't supposed to win, but we did, not because we're special, but because we chose to believe in second chances. And let me tell you something, those are the best kind."